Hello, given that lane swaps are a thing yet again, why are we trying so hard to stop them in the first place? Why not accept that lane swaps just an inefficient thing for pros to do? Um, so if you want a design principle here, the question was like, why lane swaps? Why not just be okay with lane swaps? Like, why do we not want them? Um, I think there's two design principles that matter here. One is there is some value in the pro game looking like the game you play on live. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things about the pro game that aren't going to be like live. The champions they play, the fact they're in voice comms, or like there's a lot that's different there. But there's some value in being like, if live is generally about top and mid and bot and jungle and support, and like pro play being around those positions, interacting with each other is probably a good thing, right? So when you have lane swaps, one of the problems is that pro play is basically just literally a different game, right? It's like it's a game where top laners don't top lane, right? And bot laners don't fight each other, right? Like that's what lane swaps is, right? And that, is as a value potentially bad if like pro play is completely mismatched from solo queue. Partially because in solo queue it's like really cool to see the things you want to do maybe show up in pro. Like lane swaps will never show up in your games, but they show up in pro. Like that kind of sucks. And then part of it's also like it sucks when your character has to be balanced around something that like literally doesn't exist like in any way in solo queue, right? Like if your character is like a god tier lane swapper and we have to nerf it repeatedly for being a god tier lane swapper, I think that's a lot worse than being like your character is really good at being controlled by faker, right? Like, if your character is good because high APM skilled players are good at it, like you might have to nerf it for pro. But I think like the justification of a pro nerf being like they're really good in lane swaps feels just so miserable if you're someone who plays that character in solo queue. So like that's one of the things is there's value in pro play having some similarity to solo queue. Again, not always going to be equally the same, but lane swaps are pretty far out there. The other thing, though, the other design value is like you should design a game where the optimal things are the cool things or the interesting things or the fun things. And it is just completely uninteresting and lame for two of the lanes to just not interact with each other. Like that's just not a compelling game state at all, especially if it's the optimal thing for the best players in the game to be doing. Right? Right? Like saying like the best players in the game, the top laners just don't get to play their game for the laning phase. It's just like that's really, really, really rough. And saying like the best players in the game don't lane against each other because it's more equitable to just avoid interaction. That's really, really, really rough. And so I think it's just like straight up, it's a worse game, basically. And so one of the reasons we try to remove lane swaps is like, we need to ideally design the game where the optimal strategy is the strategy that promotes like things like players interacting with each other. Getting rid of lane swaps is similar to like the desire that we generally have to get rid of funnel strats. Sometimes we'll have metas where it's like Faker's locking in Taric so he can funnel his bot laner and all the gold in mid lane to a Kai'Sa who's also jungling, right? Like we've had something like that happen before, right? And funnel strats similarly are just like, well, they're just completely uninteractive, right? They don't. Both teams are opting into like handshaking out of interaction so they can just funnel something because that's the optimal way to play, and like that's also like pretty miserable and probably not like the game we're trying to create. So we move away from it. So yeah, that's like TLDR. Lane swaps are rough because they make the pro game vastly different from the solo queue game. And they're also rough because they make the game just two of the lanes just stop interacting and handshake, which is just, I think, a pretty lame way for the game to play out, especially in regards to top laners who then just don't get to play the game for a meaningful portion of it.
What do you think about making Hexblade more viable and more champs with cool ults like Aatrox, Pantheon, Set, Hecarim, Cassante? What changes would you make? I would say, from my perspective, I look at those champions that you're naming, and I wouldn't say, aside from Set, that I wouldn't say that I would want Hexblade to be viable. Right? Hexblade's an attack speed item. I think we could make more ultimate based items, which I'm always a huge fan of. Right? You're you know, you're this is like, what's a good example here? This is like, here's the scenario that you just created. Local man creates glass bottle factory, and now everyone is packing their drinks in glass bottles and drinking from the glass bottles. And you're someone who really likes the glass bottle, and you're like, hey, how do we get it so that so that we can get our beer in glass bottles as well? And you're pitching it to me, the creator of the glass bottle factory. And I'm like, well, we could make a new type of glass bottle for beer, you know? You know, I like, this probably isn't readily apparent to people from the outside, but Malignance predates Hexplate by months, because the AP system, I redid the AP system about halfway through 2023 when I was working on 2024 preseason, and Hexplate was actually modeled after Malignance. The designer who was working on the fighter system, you know, months later said, hey, Malignance, that's really cool. I'm going to make an item like something sort of like that for divers. Now, obviously, the first version didn't work out super well, but that was the idea, right? I am I'm the factory maker, right? I'm the originator here of Malignance, and I think Malignance is awesome. I think the ult items are awesome. You know, I also did Zeke's as just ult to get the thing. So ultimately, I think if we wanted champions like Aatrox or, say, Hecarim or Cassante, like these champions that do not want attack speed, to buy a ultimate haste item that does something cool when they ult, I think that's a totally reasonable idea, but I don't think that item is supposed to be Hexplate. I think Hexplate makes some sense as an attack speed item, or at least it's found a cool space as an attack enabling item. And those champions are not champions that are looking to get, 50% AS, right? And so that's my perspective is we could make more items like this, right? Ultimates are just such a cool central part of League of Legends. I think it actually makes sense to have more items that would be about your ultimate in some way. Whether that's a trigger when you ult or whether that's your ult has some new property like Malignance. Honestly, I think we should probably do another Malignance type item, like your ult has a new property, rather than more steroids when you ult. Not that I think steroids when you ult are bad. I just think we already have two, sort of. Well, I guess we have one steroid and one like spell effect. Yeah, maybe it's fine to have another steroid of some kind. But I think we should have another Malignance somewhere for some subclass or some class. Could be really cool.